Well, that showcase was certainly something. Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. As the title and intro suggest, I'm going to be talking about Resident Evil 9 Requiem yet again. Been a while since I've had the ability to talk about this game, but like I've done previously in other videos, I'll be breaking down the gameplay and what we do see, and I'll be talking about my overall thoughts on the showcase later, because none of them are good. Honestly, I'm very excited for this game, but I'm left feeling a little bit conflicted by some of the info for this game and what we do see during the showcase. Speaking of, we do see quite a lot of new gameplay, and very interestingly enough, they are referencing a lot of previous Resident Evil games with the two styles of horror for the two different protagonists, where previously they've only sought to do one or the other, or try to intertwine the two to mixed results, where in most games they try to stick to one style, which is survival horror, or in other games they try to do the action horror side of things, and sometimes they've tried to intertwine the two, and it hasn't worked out. In Resident Evil 9 Requiem, they give you two different protagonists with two different styles of the Resident Evil formula, with Grace representing the survival horror experience with item management and memorizing your routes and other various things. Leon's gameplay represents the action horror side of things when it comes to slight item management, but other elements of that type of experience. So it splits the two different styles of survival horror down the middle into these two separate protagonists, and it kind of works fairly well. And in the showcase, the developers did say they were taking a lot of influence from what they learned from Resident Evil 7 and 2 Remake respectively, but I also see a lot of influence from Resident Evil 4 Remake and 8 respectively. I gotta say, I'm very excited on the prospect of them doing this, because it splits the two different styles down the middle where you can get a bit of both worlds. Speaking of, breaking down some of the new footage of what we see, Grace's gameplay takes a lot of influence from what we've seen from Resident Evil 2 Remake and also Resident Evil 7. Grace's gameplay is like a mixture of what we got from Resident Evil 7 with Ethan Winters, but also what we got from Leon S. Kennedy in Resident Evil 2 Remake. You obviously have a pistol, but one of the guns you do have is actually called Requiem, to very similar to the title of the game itself, which is kind of interesting and on the nose. And the gun itself does a lot of damage, and it kind of reminds me a mixture of a revolver, but also the gun we had in Resident Evil 7 called the Wesker, or something along those lines, because I remember it kind of being an homage to Albert Wesker, but I can't remember the exact name. And I gotta say, it's pretty interesting that she does have an iconic gun to represent her character. Other aspects of Grace's gameplay call back to Resident Evil 7 a lot when it comes to sneaking around, at least in first person, but you also have a system that returns from Resident Evil 7 that Ethan had, and that was the backpack system, which was kind of an obvious idea for them to bring back considering what we've seen from Grace's concept art, but it is also interesting to see it make a return considering it was going to be in Resident Evil 8 as well, but it was ultimately cut. So them bringing it back and also slightly refining it, at least for Grace in this game, is actually pretty amazing, and I'm kind of interested to see what they do. They also bring back other elements from Resident Evil 7 like the crafting system and slightly refine it and expand on it, and I know the crafting system is something a lot of fans are getting sick of, but in this case I feel it does work a little bit because they are expanding on it and taking a lot of influence from what they learned from the system in 7, refining it a little bit further, because in that game there was a lot of mixing and matching, just chem fluid all the time. But with this crafting system, it looks like they're mixing together the one we had in that game and also the one we had in the original Resident Evil 3 and 4 Remake, where there's more than one material that you have to get to actually craft certain items to get around and other various things, which will make playing Grace a little bit different, especially with the difficulty changes. This is an aspect of this game that I'm 50-50 on, but I'm also kind of interested to see with how they've changed the normal difficulty in this game to be more like the originals. So just like in the hard difficulty for some of the remakes, they force you to use ink ribbons to save from the typewriters. In the normal difficulty for this game, they're doing something fairly similar. This is something that the hardcore fans actually want, but something that I'm personally 50-50 on, because would this mean they are removing the auto-saving feature, rolling back to the original way they were doing things? And I like some of that, but I also dislike some of that. So I'm kind of conflicted on this change, but I am slightly excited to see how this could work. And moving over to Leon's gameplay and what we do see of it, it is very similar to what we've had in the Resident Evil 4 Remake and also Resident Evil 8, where it does give a good idea of what an RE5 remake could look like if Capcom would actually make take it, but looking closer at Leon's gameplay, it does feel very similar to Resident Evil 4 Remake, and it does share a lot of similarities to the point where it feels like they are reusing a lot of assets from that game, which has me incredibly conflicted. On one hand, I love that remake, and I also love the systems that were a part of it, but on the other hand, I feel this is a bit lazy. Not to insult Capcom, but it does feel a little bit lazy, where I feel like how Arkham fans felt when playing Batman Arkham Origins, with the reuse of assets from Batman Arkham City feeling very evident in kind of ruining your experience. But with that game, they really didn't have the opportunity to make a custom system that is still similar to Batman Arkham Asylum. With this, there is no excuse. So I'm not going to give them a complete free pass, because the UI is almost one-to-one from the remake, with only slight deviations here and there. And the same goes for Leon's gameplay in the game, where I am excited about certain aspects of it. In some ways, it feels too close to what we had in Resident Evil 4 Remake. And obviously, we can see that Leon's gameplay is a complete distinction from Grace's, where it leans into the action horror side of things, which is something that I love that they did do. Now, I will say that there isn't all reskinned elements when it comes to Leon's gameplay. He does have a different weapon this time around. It does share some similarities to the knives of the Resident Evil 4 Remake and Resident Evil 2 Remake, but it is arguably different, being a hatchet. And it does share some similar systems to the knives of the previous games, but it also has some new ones to add on to it. You can briefly see Leon actually sharpening his hatchet, which replenishes its durability, so it acts as the idea of you having to repair it through a merchant, which actually acts as a certain mechanic out of the action horror side of things. Where in the Resident Evil 4 Remake, you had to repair your knives with the merchant. In this, it doesn't seem like there is going to be one, so you have to do it on your own, which does bring up an interesting addition or idea to Leon's gameplay that they could be adding, where they're mixing together elements from the remake of Resident Evil 2 when it comes to upgrading your weapons, certain ways you can do it in Resident Evil 4 Remake and 7 respectively, which this change is actually pretty interesting, and it could add on to the experience, forcing you to have to hunt down certain materials or different upgradable components for your weapons and body armor. And with them already upgrading the crafting system when it comes to Grace's gameplay, it would make sense for them to do the same for Leon. Also, with other additions to Leon's gameplay, we do see that he does have not the backpack system, but the suitcase system from Resident Evil 4 Remake and Resident Evil 8 as well. Also, we do learn a little bit more about the overall enemies of this game being quite different than the ones that we're used to, where they do share some similarities to the Ganados and also the zombies of the previous games. They're like the Ganados, they can actually talk, but they also share some similar human characteristics for what they did before they died. And the way Capcom and the directors explained this element was kind of confusing, and I didn't quite understand it. Overall, they do kind of keep some elements of the story a bit vague, but they do hint at some things. There are elements that are pretty interesting additions to the overall lore, but I will say for the showcase itself, I'm not going to lie, I'm a little bit disappointed. There are a lot of positives and things that I like about the additions to the gameplay. There are also a lot of negatives, and honestly some things that I'm kind of annoyed by. Not only did we not get a reveal for a demo, which would make sense considering every game has gotten a demo, and no, I'm not counting the fact that they showed this at the Game Awards and people got to play a demo in private. Most every game by Capcom has gotten a demo for the public to play. Very weird that they haven't actually gave us a release date for the demo, and if they give us a demo at all, this would be the first Resident Evil game that hasn't actually gotten a public demo. It's not only disappointing, but it's also a little bit strange in a lot of ways. I can understand them not wanting to spoil the overall story, but you could just give us the same one from Summer Game Fest and call it a day. I wouldn't even get mad about that. And maybe I'm speaking a bit too soon and they will probably give us a demo, but if they don't, it's a little odd. And the fact that this showcase slightly disappointing in certain aspects, because it felt like more of an advertisement for certain things. Like Leon's watch and car are apparently certain models in real life, and we're gonna get advertisements for them. Like, it's cool that Capcom is partnering with these companies to do this, but I don't care. The rest of the info is just stuff that we already knew about. Really, this whole showcase was some elements that we knew and didn't know. Really, they were just showing us more of Leon's gameplay and expansions to it with some slight things for Grace. Cool, there's going to be figures, statues for Resident Evil 9. Like, yeah, we knew that was going to probably happen. And other different things, like a controller for Switch 2, we saw that before. Really, honestly, this showcase felt like a bit of a waste waste of time. Yeah, we get some new things and some better looks at different things when it comes to the gameplay of these two distinct characters, but other than that, this whole thing felt like a waste. We should have just gotten a demo or something. Because Leon's gameplay felt like a reuse of Resident Evil 4 stuff, and Grace's gameplay feels like they are doing some distinct things, but we don't see enough of it to actually get more excited. It kind of leaves me in a state of kind of confusion and being a bit underwhelmed. But I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. What did you think of the showcase? Am I wrong? And also, are there any details that I may have missed when it comes to the gameplay? Put all your thoughts, whether you agree or disagree, in the comments. I would love to read them. Make sure to like this video if you did enjoy, or change it to a dislike. It's perfectly fine. And also, make sure to subscribe if you are new and hit the bell notification button to be notified whether I upload, whether it's Devil May Cry, Resident Evil, or any other content under the sun. Check out some of the videos on screen right now, and have a good rest of your guys' night, morning, afternoon, or whatever it is for you in the world. Peace out. Bye-bye.